Welcome to Creative Questions, the podcast where we attempt to review various creative projects we ourselves are part of and or other people's unique creations in an attempt to celebrate the creative inspiration in all of us. I am Desiree Silver, your host and owner of New Nerd Novelties and hashtag Own Your Weird Lifestyle brand.
And I'm your co-host, Liam Hewlett, back at it again for another week.
How are you doing this week, Liam?
Oh, last week was rough, but on the upward slope, I guess. How about yourself?
The same. New medication means I'm actually withdrawing, and withdrawing kind of sucks.
Yeah, I've got new meds starting tomorrow, basically, but they should be identical to the ones I was on before. So hopefully not much changes there. Yeah. Other than that, what have you been up to this last week?
So I finished those chainmail earrings.
I see that.
I have a crap picture there because I haven't had time yet to do the cauldron appearing thing.
Right. It doesn't look too bad. Like the picture, and the earrings look nice.
Yeah, they look really good. So I was pretty happy with that. I even had to buy earring hooks because I couldn't find any of mine, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure you have them somewhere.
Yeah, me being me, I probably have a shit ton somewhere, but do I know where? No. So these look really good. I like them. And Dory and I will be doing that cool cauldron thing. I bought like one of those science fair project backboards so we could do it in a place that's not going to set off the fire alarm.
There you go.
And then my cleaning lady broke it up and put it in a recycle this morning.
Oh.
I'm like, I'm really glad I didn't pay full price for that. Good thing I know where I can get another one.
Yeah.
A little overly ambitious with the recycling there.
Yeah, I mean, it's cardboard. You're not wrong.
And it was close to the cardboard thing, but not in it, so I don't really blame her. But now I have to go buy it again. Damn it. I also was working on, I'm going to make a coffin pillow like I did last time I got a picture of it. But this time, I'm going to make it like mummy themed. So I've been crocheting again. Because I thought because I haven't been feeling well enough to do much, so I sit on the couch and crochet.
I predicted it last week. I said you're doing chainmail, you're gonna start crocheting next, and there you go.
They're very meditative, especially when you don't feel well. So, yeah, I'm gonna wrap up one of those coffin ones that have like little eyeballs showing, so it looks like a mummy that in the wrong type of coffin. I know they have a sarcophagus, but those don't really translate that well to stuffed pillows. So. No. It's cute. I'm doing cute Halloween. And I think I might do a Dracula one too eventually.
With crocheting, do you think you could make like a mummy shaped pillow? Right? Because the crochet weave already kind of looks like bandages, right? And,
I probably could, yeah.
Right? If you mixed in different colors of gray and white, you might be able to make like a little wrapped person as a pillow. Just an idea.
Yeah, a friend of mine does the mini ones. I
don't think it would be that different from shape-wise from a coffin, would it?
Probably not, but I don't make crochet coffins. I'm making the coffin out of fabric, and then I'm wrapping it with the crochet. The thing with crochet, I like to do it so that I don't have to count the stitches, because if you do, then it's no longer a stress release. Because then I take it apart and put it back together a million times.
Yeah, if you have to mix in a pattern or something like that.
Yeah, but a friend of mine makes like little emojis and like stuffies, and she's actually given them away for Halloween, like little heads, jack heads and stuff. And she made me a chessboard. Actually, I guess I'll give you the picture for that later to link down.
A crocheted chessboard?
Yeah, she crocheted me a checkerboard. And then both Dory and I forgot how to play checkers. So we're going to have to look it up because it's been so long.
Okay.
I mean, how do you forget not to, I mean, honestly, we're both kind of out of it when we got it. But I'm like, how could we forget how to play checkers?
Yeah, I've played chess against Doran within the last year or two, and that's complicated checkers.
You played chess against Doran? What was that?
Yeah, when we were visiting a friend of the family, Carol Mitchell in Vernon.
Oh yeah, I don't remember how to play chess. I never really learned. But yeah, I had a hard time with checkers. Anyway, I'll get pictures of that. I've got a little photo booth thing set up. I also have got 33 items on Poshmark set up.
Nice.
Which I'm pretty proud of myself because that's 100 words each with a whole bunch of pictures, and I have to clean those things because everything's dusty.
Yeah, that's what you've been doing this last week?
Yeah, and I sold 4 items altogether, and I've got 3 5-star reviews. The other one's still waiting to get delivered, but
That's pretty good.
I'm pretty proud of myself. Yeah.
Most people don't leave reviews, so it's nice to have 3 out of 4 people actually do that.
Yeah, the 4th probably will. It's just she hasn't gotten it yet, so.
Yeah.
And then I also did 500 words for every, like, that thing for the website.
Mm-hmm.
So our idea was to do 100 words of the actual item now, 100 words of the category it's from, and then 100 words for about the creator. So I did the about the creator, which is easy. She wanted 100 words, but she wanted 5 different variations of those 100 words.
That's still not that hard. Like
That's
if you're talking
still,
about
like,
yourself,
yeah,
right?
2
That's
pages.
our favorite
Yeah.
subject.
But then, so I did that. That was pretty easy. The hard part is the categories. Now the categories have to have 500 words, 100 words 5 times. How much can you write about hair bows? So I did, pulling my teeth, 500 words about hair bows and bow ties, because they can be worn as each. So now I have to do that for like the 20 plus other categories I have. But I was pretty proud of myself because it kind of felt like reading through Tolkien's 150 pages of concerning hobbits, because nobody cares except for him, and he probably enjoyed writing that. But reading it felt like me writing this 5 times over.
I've never read the appendices, the appendices for Lord of the Rings.
That's
They're
the
just
first 150 pages of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
it's
it
not
is.
even the appendices.
I also kind of skipped that too.
Skipped it, yeah, because you don't need to. All you need to know is hobbits like to eat, farm,
and there's a big
smoke
party
pot,
going on, yeah,
and drink. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
They're
I've
little hedonists.
definitely never touched the appendices though. Like as soon as the book's over, I'm like, cool, done. That was it.
I think I looked up at the relationship stuff between Aragorn because I'm like, I'm confused, but that was it.
Right. Well, I read those books before the movies came out, and I never revisited them, so I wasn't interested in the appendices.
I don't blame you.
But as for what I've done this week, like I said, wasn't a great week for me. We pushed back our D&D session because some of the other guys were either occupied or not feeling up to it. So we pushed it back, but then we realized that this weekend coming up is Thanksgiving, in Canada anyway. And so we pushed it back again. So I've got way more time than I need to paint my miniatures. So I only painted 3 out of 5. I wasn't really going hard at it.
Well, I'm glad because you were really worried about getting them done.
Well, I mean, I could have gotten it done if I really wanted to push myself, but I didn't need to. Like, rather than having, like, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, like, rather than having 3 days, now I've got, like, 2 weeks and 3 days, so way more than I need. Like
Especially
I said,
if you're not feeling well, though. At least it gives you leisure time.
Yeah, each miniature is about, like, 2 to 3 hours, depending how distracted I get while I'm doing it. Most of the time, it's about 2 hours, and so I did paint, like I said, I got 3 of them, and I've got pictures there in the link dump of the Morok and White Cloaks is what I'm painting. They're going to be dressed for the weather, winter, you know.
Okay, I'm looking at them now. Yeah, they definitely got lots of, like, furs and stuff going on for clothes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the middle one, the Morok, is the one with a fox head.
Oh, okay. I see the fox head.
Yep.
Did you have to take that off another miniature?
Yeah, I got it as a bit in a different sprue. But I'm happy with how he turned out, because it could have been a lot worse.
It doesn't look mismatched in a bad way.
Yeah, it's more proportional than most beast heads that I have available to me. That's why I was so happy to find it. And while that specific beast head doesn't have much in the way of texture, so I had to add a lot in the way of, like, trying to make a fur texture. It's a little bit too glossy for my liking. It doesn't have much fur texture on it. So, like, it could be better, but way better than what I thought I would originally have to do. So, yeah, I'm happy enough with how it turned out. Especially whether or not this becomes a large character in the campaign, I don't know. They might just murder him in their first encounter, so.
Good, bad, I don't know. He might get murdered. We're good.
Yeah. I'll put more attention to him if he survives the encounters.
So
which is unlikely.
So do we want to talk about this week? I'm guessing we're going to talk about other makes we've made, other big makes.
Yeah.
So,
well,
do you want to go first?
Yeah, one of our main talking points about the podcast is our projects, and so far we've only done one episode talking about our past projects. So yeah, we've got plenty that we can talk about. The one I'm bringing to the table is, for this week, my modular dungeon and cave system that I sort of made in an impromptu way for my Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So yeah, I'll start off with that.
Okay.
So I'll start with why I made it, or how it sort of evolved into something that I needed to make for my Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So originally, when we started playing D&D about a year and a half ago now, I had a significant collection of Warhammer Fantasy miniatures and terrain. So that's all large-scale armies and terrain that's suitable for large-scale armies to interact with, such as ruined buildings, craters, forests, swamps, ponds, stuff like that. Very little on the micro scale. Almost nothing, in fact. So no crates, barrels, lanterns, torches. That's the sort of thing that it should be quite necessary for a D&D scale campaign, but is completely unnecessary for tabletop wargaming. So I didn't have any of it. So a lot of this stuff I had to start collecting on my own. One of the largest parts of Dungeons and Dragons, it's in the name, is dungeons. And there is almost no time when you have a full-scale army battle taking place in a dungeon, or even a small confined space. It just doesn't facilitate troop movement and in a fun or interesting way. So it doesn't happen in Tabletop Warhammer that you start crawling around caves or through catacombs and corridors. So I didn't have any of that available to me. And I knew going into it that if this D&D thing was going to last more than a couple sessions, I was going to need eventually to start making some sort of terrain system so that I could represent these caves and dungeons and things like that. I had some leeway in how I set up the campaign. I made it in basically a New World setting so that they more often than not would come into jungle and forest terrain, of which I had an abundant amount. And I had, ruins and buildings and rocks and things like that for them to interact with on the larger scale. And then I would give myself some extra time to develop those cave and dungeon terrains. So I started off piecemeal, doing it one at a time. The first cave that I ever made was for a viper pit for like our third session or so. The town that the guys are based out of had a bounty for a nest of snakes, and so the guys took that bounty as a small low-level adventuring party is wont to do. They are doing odd jobs at that. In that session, they also went to a rock that had a bunch of harpies on top of it to retrieve a hat. Right? They're literally hitting rats for their gold pieces. So that's the level of interaction that I wanted to have. So I didn't need to have like a really large dungeon system all at once. I just needed them to have a cave to go into. And so that's what I started with. I've got just like a cave. And I made that in a way that I would continue to do for the rest of my dungeon systems. And I took some pink polystyrene, which I used for almost all of my terrain making. And it was a leftover piece of pink polystyrene, basically. I attached other leftover pieces of pink polystyrene to make cave walls, and then used patching compound or drywall mud in order to blend some of the edges and crack fill, and then took a Dremel to it to give some texture to the walls and dry brushed it a whole bunch of times. And that's all I really had to do, and that's all I really did do for the remainder of this system that I made. But to start off, I only needed that one piece, and it was serviceable. For a long time, I used that piece a lot, because there's a lot of times that you go into caves as a D&D party, even if you're out in the wilderness, whether it be to chase down some bandits that are holed up or to root out a owlbear or whatever it might be. So I used it quite a bit, and it was entertaining, especially quite memorable for that first session when they went into the viper pit and there was a giant constrictor snake that would be like 2 or 3 times the size of a largest anaconda in real world size. And they murdered that thing without really any issue, but it was the poisonous flying snakes that were also present within this jungle that really gave them issue.
I was gonna ask if this was the flying snakes.
Yes, yeah. This was the incarnation, the origination of the nemesis of the campaign so far, being the blue flying snake. That they put the majority of their effort, rightly so, towards fighting the big beastie in the cave. But these two flying snakes that I also made for the session came in and did some flybys. One of which got just absolutely destroyed, and then the other one flew in, bit the warlock, I believe, either the warlock or the wizard, got downed by this poisonous snake, and then it just flew out of the cave after all the other snakes had been slaughtered. It was doing its flyby, so it flew out of the cave. Its sense of preservation was enough for it to just go out, and they had 2 full rounds of both melee and ranged attacks in order to try to kill this thing, and they couldn't touch it. And so it got away. And it got away, and it did more damage than any other thing in that cave. It almost killed the warlock, I believe it was.
And you just made these snakes for shits and giggles, I think, right?
I made them for the specific, I really enjoy, both in video games and in any kind of role-playing, the low-level, grounded, early stuff that you do, right? Where it's you're getting by the skin of your teeth, you're killing rats for gold or whatever, right? Before everything gets really complicated and you get into a big storyline or there's motivations behind anything, you're glorified exterminators as low-level adventurers. And so that's why I made the snake pit, right? Just to give them that experience of you're a low-level adventurer, here's an odd job. And it was an odd job that almost killed one of them. It was great.
Damn, those poisonous
almost killed one of them, and they didn't get their revenge. They had ample opportunity. They just rolled really badly and missed it horribly, and it just left. So later on, as a running joke in the campaign, because they are quite effective as a party and healing and damage wise, they're a very strong party. And so oftentimes when role playing comes to an actual battle, they'll just ace it, right? There's been very few battles where they've had to run away because they've been outclassed. That's happened a few times, but most of the time they can overpower whatever they come across. And so this is one of the rare instances where something got away. And so there was a running joke, especially early in the campaign, that flying snake was going to turn into a wyvern and come back as the big bad of the campaign. And eventually, I did have it come back when the wizard had his crow familiar patrolling around, and it rolled a natural 1 on its stealth or perception checks for the check that it was making, and it got eaten by that flying snake later on in the campaign.
The smallest things that'll turn into memes, because no one would have expected that.
No, yeah, they absolutely. The thing had 4 or 6 hit points or something like that. If they had touched it, it was dead. They just couldn't meet its AC for whatever reason. So, that one piece of terrain that I made, just a simple cave, it's like a 2-step cave. I've got pictures of it in the link dump, the first piece that I made, where it's got a little raised section that you could either enter from or it can be an exit out of. And then the lower section that also has a much smaller entrance into it, so you could have a main cave mouth and a side exit, or you could just ignore that side exit and consider it an additional wall. But even when I did make this first piece, I did have the intention of okay, I'm making this, but I want to be able to add onto it at some point later. That's why I made it have more than just one entrance and exit. I didn't want my first piece that I made to be a dead end. And so later on in the campaign, I started adding to it in order to facilitate new combat encounters, but also to make it so I had more caves available in my arsenal. As I continued to add to this system, every additional piece that I made with the intention of it being able to connect to the other pieces in multiple different ways. Now, for the cave systems that I did make, I wanted it to look more natural than not, and so I didn't make them with any right angle. I didn't make them with any specific angles or connections in mind. I didn't want to put them onto a grid, basically. There's a lot of rounded edges and things like that. But I made a lot of the walls of these caves have potential entrances and exits so they could connect to each other in multiple different ways. And I have different heights for different things so that they could, when put together, represent like a larger room, or they could be combined into like a chain of cave systems and things like that. So I added to it bit by bit most of the time for specific combat encounters. I would make a configuration where it's like, okay, this is for this combat encounter. And then if I needed a random combat encounter, like they go into a cave and they find some spiders or whatever, then I would switch around my existing cave system that I already had. It became a tool of my arsenal. And I continued to add to it. I've got multiple pieces of the natural caves that I had, and after a certain point I felt like I was pretty set with the natural caves, and at least because I didn't think that the guys would be going into a very long extended journey or adventure into like a natural cave dungeon. So the amount that I had prepared, I feel, is what is necessary. But then they went into Tiefenhald for an extended period of time, which is the Lost Dwarven City that I've mentioned before. That was just a full subterranean dungeon. And so I'm like, okay, the natural stuff is fine, but it's not going to represent what I want from Tiefenhald, because Tiefenhald is a dwarven settlement. It's not going to look rough or uncultured. It's going to be all masoned, right? It's all going to have to be cut stone and very deliberate, and it's going to have traps and statues and crumbling debris, and it's completely different from a cave system. So I made an additional dungeon system to go with my cave system. And that one, again, I wanted it to be modular in many different ways. I wanted it to be able to represent Tiefenhald in as many ways as I could possibly make it. So I split it up into multiple different parts that could be used as either intersections or corners or rooms or platforms or whatever it might be. And I just made a whole bunch of it during the time that they were in Tiefenhald. Basically every session I just kept on adding to it so that I could make new rooms filled with traps or new crumbling hallways that they could traverse, and added in stone passages, and all of it was cultured stone. And the way I made that effect is I took very deliberate cuts of the pink polystyrene and made every tile a 1-inch square grid by using a ruler and an X-Acto knife. Put down what would be like a D&D grid on the floor, and then I did a similar thing with the walls as well, just at a half scale. I think they're 1/2-inch blocks for each of those. And so I've got the other pictures that I have there of just like how many different configurations I can make on the fly and have done for Tiefenhald. It's a very versatile system, made almost entirely with pink polystyrene and like construction adhesive. The reason I use construction adhesive to keep all this stuff together, along with like the drywall mud and patch filler to fill in the cracks, is it makes it a very durable system. I can store this stuff without having to be gentle with it. I throw it around all the time, and that construction adhesive, not only does it not eat through the pink polystyrene, it is cheap. Like it's not expensive stuff. And
what does it look like? I don't know about construction adhesive. Oh, you mean
it's
just
what you would get in a caulking gun. I've got a picture of the materials
okay,
up
the
at the top
caulking
there.
gun. Okay, I was looking at that. I'm like, what's the caulk for?
Yeah, that's the construction adhesive. So it comes out like brown, and it takes like a full day to dry, but once it dries, it's super hard. And it's actually somewhat difficult to Dremel through, even if you have too much if you have too much overfill. But it's got, at least in my opinion, the best bind on the pink polystyrene that I use. It makes it super reliable. Like I very much intend to be using this cave and dungeon system for as long as I'm playing D&D, however long that might be. And I definitely think that the pink polystyrene is going to crumble way before any of the stuff connecting it to itself. Whereas if you use other weaker forms of adhesive, like white glue, for example, it just won't hold up after repeated
polystyrene
use.
is a pain in the ass to glue together. We had this stuff we called green goo when we were at Klondike Kid stuff, and they had to glue the styrofoam together. Yeah, it was very, very specific, and it had to be mixed in 2 parts out of a spray gun. And besides industrial, I think that's probably the best bet you have there.
Yeah, and construction adhesive wouldn't be conducive to like projects like that because they need to not take 24 hours to dry or whatever.
Yeah, that was like a 3-minute bind.
Yeah. And it would probably be like stronger, but like this stuff is cheap, readily available, and it's just way better than the other kind of adhesives. That doesn't eat through the pink polystyrene, right? Because if it's anything that's too caustic, then it just won't work with the polystyrene.
We could probably do a whole episode on glue, because even depending, I don't know if I'm using the right glue for certain projects either. It takes a while to figure out the right adhesives for the right items.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's an easier way to figure it out than just doing it by trial and error, but that's how I do it. Right?
Or a lot of people here use this. I'm like, where do I even get that? Like, is that available in Canada? I don't know.
That's actually one of the things I find about difficult about getting advice from hobbyists in like the tabletop community is very little of their input is from even North America. A lot of their input is from the UK, and they just have different materials than we do.
Yeah,
so
do.
It's like even the styrofoam that they use looks different, right? And you're like,
that's not the same stuff.
yeah, or is it? I don't know. I can't touch it, so I can't tell, right? It might be like chemically different rather than just like color as well.
Well, we have the white as well. Do they have white and pink, or they don't have?
But the white and pink are very different products, right?
They are.
They are a completely different beast. And when I first started in the hobby, I thought they were the same, right? And so I used like packing styrofoam because that's what I had available to me at the house as a kid, right? There would have been some left over from some thing that we have gotten. And so I was like, okay, this is the thing that people were using for the terrain. Why is it so difficult to work with? It is horrible to deal with. If you're trying to make terrain, try to avoid using white styrofoam. It's not polystyrene, it's styrofoam. Don't use styrofoam. It's the
That's
worst
what we
thing
were
to work
using
with.
in the business I was in. They used the white stuff. Yeah,
it's
even worse for
difficult to work with.
melting. And yeah.
Yeah, it makes such a mess. It's so difficult to work with compared to the pink polystyrene, which is just like it's so easy in how like they're completely different. But as a kid, I had no idea.
And you had what you had on? I mean, really, I don't even remember ever having really the pink stuff around.
No, because you have to buy it, right? It's used as an insulation, and it's not as cheap as you would hope. Honestly, it's one of the most expensive parts of the projects that I do for terrain because I use a lot of paint on my terrain. The paint on my terrain, I will get oops cans is what they're called from hardware stores or paint stores, where somebody mixes a color and they either don't like it or they return it, or like part of it spilled or whatever, and they return it. And once a paint can has been tinted, its price gets slashed by an obscene amount because they can't resell it. Nobody wants a pre-tinted color. Everybody has a specific color that they want, and they want it made for them. So when you that's a tip for anybody that wants to get a bunch of paint that you don't have to carry, especially because earth tones are very common in house paint.
That's true.
Right? So if you want those beiges, grays, browns, that sort of thing, get oops paints. You can get like a full gallon or even larger. The way they do it at Home Depot, which is where I work, the small like tester cans are $1 for an oops can, when usually they're like I think 5 or 6. And for one size above that, it's $3 for a can that would usually be like 30 to 40, something like that. And then you can go even larger than that, and those ones are generally like 60 bucks. It depends on, some of the paint I've got is like $90 cans I got for $9 because they'd been tinted. All of the oops paint, no matter what it is, it's priced by size, not by what kind of paint it is.
And the house paint doesn't eat the polystyrene?
No, and the house paint almost universally now are paints and primers in one. So you get to use your paint as the primer.
That's because we're all lazy and we don't want to prime and paint.
Yeah, which is great when you're doing terrain because, again, the polystyrene, you can't spray primer it. So you are going to have to use a paint primer in some way, shape, or form to begin with anyway. So having your first base coat be a paint and primer and have it be obscenely cheap, super cool. The drywall patching or the drywall mud, that stuff is also super cheap. Whereas the pink polystyrene by sheet, if you're buying it, it's like, depending on the size and like gauge that you're getting, it could be like $60+.
But that's for a big piece, isn't it?
It is for a big piece, and that can go through multiple different projects, and you're going to use like all of it, because even when you have little scraps and bits and pieces, I turn those into rocks and scattered terrain all the time. So it is something that if you're making wargaming terrain is just a very useful product to have, and it's incredibly easy to work with. It's also great for other crafts as well besides the terrain making. We have a lot of it around the house because our mom likes to make her own decorations for Halloween, and a lot of that will wind up being made out of pink polystyrene. It's just a very versatile material.
Weird side note, I actually use a chunk of it for felting. Felting is when you take roving, which is like the sheep's wool, but it hasn't been turned into yarn yet. And then you poke it with these needles that have like barbs on it, and it turns it into a condensed felted object. Well, you gotta stab it into something, and you don't want to stab it into you.
Yeah.
So you stab it into the pink polystyrene or like a really thick sponge.
Oh, sponge.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sponges that are super thick are not like pretty easy to find, I've found lately. So I'm like, oh, I'll just take this polystyrene from Dad and I'll stab it to death because it's safe and it won't go through to my fingers.
Yeah, it unlike the styrofoam as well. Like, the biggest problem with styrofoam is it's a bunch of like little pellets melted together basically, and so as soon as you start breaking it or cracking it, it just turns into those little pellets and they wind up everywhere. Whereas pink polystyrene is like, it's a solid thing. It's kind of like a melamine, right? The wood version of that, where it's a bunch of particulates put together. And so for the polystyrene, you can take, and I do often, I'll take some sort of edge, most of the time like a drywall Dremel or something like that, anything that is like metal with an edge, and you can just scrape texture into it, and
like,
you get
like chisel into it without having to use force.
Oh yeah, you can sculpt many different kinds of, however much effort you want to put into it. You can make whatever you want out of this stuff, especially if you're willing to put the time into it. You can sand it, you can make it smooth, you can make it rough, you can get all different kinds of textures out of this product.
Also with Dremel, I don't know if many people know what that tool is. Maybe you can tell them, so, because that's a pretty cool artistic tool.
Yeah, and one you find pretty often when you're dealing with like woodworking. It's, how best would you describe it? It's basically like it's a router. Like it's a portable router.
A handheld router or a drill. It spins in a circle, and you put bits on the end of it, which have different sanding qualities.
Yeah, and different shapes as well. So you can get a whole bunch of different kind of nubs, but it is like, it's not set into a jig. So it's dependent upon your own wrist movements to get whatever it is that you're trying to get out of it.
And it's small and portable and not as hard on the hands. So it's kind of like using a wood burning kit as like a pen, but it's slightly heavier. Yeah,
or like a soldering iron, but with drill bits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want one. I'm glad you guys have one. I'm looking forward to playing with it. It's good for wood, glass, styrofoam, whatever you want to use it for. You just get the right bit. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess, do you have anything else to say about your lovely thing there, or we want to go into my creation?
Yeah, we can go into yours, I think. The only thing like about mine is that like I painted it mostly uniformly, but I'm pretty bad about keeping track of what paints I use. So oftentimes I just wing it with looking at what I've already made and then trying to somewhat match it. There are definitely people that are way better at keeping track of what colors they've used for their terrain pieces or armies or whatever. But I'm fine. I've always been fine with like, I want as much versatility out of the stuff that I make, and I do make them to be very durable and like long lasting, so I can use this stuff just constantly. Like the guys go into a cave I wasn't expecting them to, I can literally pull it out of my ass now. I don't have to worry about it.
Well, as we said before on this as well, you have some pretty good color matching abilities, much better than me anyway. So I guess you can wing it if you want to, as long as it looks good. And from the pictures, I don't see much of a difference at all. I've actually not seen these before. They look really great.
Oh yeah, probably haven't seen them in action.
No, not the ones from the mountain, just I think the caves. They look great.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good. I was worried that you cut each piece of those styrofoam individually blocks. That would take forever. All those little blocks on the side, bricks. Yeah, no.
Oh yeah, no. I use a ruler to cut into the styrofoam just to give it that illusion, right?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, no, that was already like I had to go through it multiple times to make sure especially after it was painted, that they were still distinct, right? Because the first time I cut them, they were with an X-Acto knife, so it's not like it was a really large groove. Mm-hmm. So I had to make sure I actually went in with the X-Acto knife and pried them apart a little bit more than just the regular cut would have done.
Because the paint would have filled it in.
Yeah, and the paint did fill it in for quite a bit. But yeah, it's a project that has been ongoing for my D&D campaign. So when
it'll probably keep going.
It will definitely keep going. Yeah, when they go into a new area, I will make more stuff for like that specific need. If they were to go into like a necropolis or whatever, right, I would start making a whole bunch of that sort of themed terrain.
And I like that you're doing D&D now, because it never really occurred to me that Warhammer doesn't have any of those cool locations. Mostly it's all fields and rubble and stuff. This is kind of fun.
Oh yeah, this would be completely unusable for Warhammer terrain because it's way too enclosed, right?
Yeah, not for big armies.
Yeah, it's not practical whatsoever.
And so to change over subjects to what I've been doing.
Yeah, I've got some pictures here in front of me that looked pretty cool.
So a couple of years ago, because I'm the Halloween spooky girl. I'm that type. I love to dress up, and Mom has a Halloween costume party every year. I believe we said that before. Mm-hmm. So one year, I decided to be Bride of Frankenstein. So a little bit of history on this costume, because I figured when I was thinking back to this, it's going to take a little while for me to source all the items for you. But found this one group of people called Fright Fest. And what they do is a bunch of BC haunters, people who have their own haunts or help with haunts, things like corn mazes and stuff, where they do their own at-home thing for the kids and usually for charity, get together in BC once a year to pull off a haunted house together, collaboratively, in August.
Yeah, on a campsite, right? They do.
Yeah, a campsite in Fort Langley, full of mosquitoes, hot as hell, in August. And they've been doing it for such a long time that the campsites itself host a trick-or-treat for the kids, and they want everybody to dress up their like RV and camping sites with Halloween decorations as well, and they have a contest for who is the best decorated plot. And so I went with Mom a couple years. I'm not really made for camping, and neither is my husband, so we didn't really get to go too often, but they have this section where they've got one of those camping cover-alls, so it's like a cement base with an overhead and electricity where you can like put your campsite benches and sit and eat, but a big one. And so that was the space where we would make these haunted houses. And so we'd have to bring in everything, and every individual haunter would have their own room. We even had to bring in...
because there were no walls. It was basically like an overhead shelter with power. They made their own walls, and they separated their own sections. And their own
roof, depending. There's also usually a roof. So, like, completely enclosed. Usually
did it not have a roof originally?
No, like, they actually put a roof.
Cement slab?
It has a roof, but we make our own as well for the haunt, because you want it to be dark, right?
Yeah, and more enclosed, right? Because
especially because it's August, it's bright. Yeah. So, yeah, they'll even put like black garbage bags over the top so that we have the darkness blackout. And so, Mom took us a couple times. There were yurts there. I don't know if anybody knows what a yurt is, but it's like a tent on top of a cabin with electricity. So it was more like glamping, because they also have showers and bathrooms, thank God, because if you're going to wear a Halloween costume with fake blood, I sure hope they have a shower. And we helped out with different themes for a couple different years in each of the individual rooms. And one of the ladies there, she likes to hit up the bridal stores to pick up their sample sizes because everybody likes, dead bride, haunted wedding. So one year she brought up something like 13 wedding dresses that she got from one of these bridal stores. And I was getting married, like I was engaged at the time. I'm like, ooh. So I bought one off her to actually use as my wedding dress. And then Mom and I and everybody else trashed the rest of them. Mom wore it and she was like a skeletal bride riding on the back of the truck telling the kids to come see this haunted house. And then they literally got me to drive over a bunch of them a couple times, and like they went through the mud and put blood and ripped them all up. And that was like the thing for that year. So I gained this like size 10 wedding dress, which at the time fit me and I was intending to wear for my wedding with a couple adjustments. So I brought that home, and the wedding kind of didn't go as planned, and I wore a purple wedding dress. I also wasn't that size anymore, so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to keep this for like a corpse bride, maybe costume sometime or something. We'll see. And that was the basis that started out as my Bride of Frankenstein. I looked at it and went, well, I'm not a size 10. I haven't been a size 10 for a very long time. So let's rip the top off, because that's definitely not going to fit. And the bottom, with that much taffeta skirt, I'm pretty sure I can figure out a way to make it fit.
So I guess that's what we should mention that we are talking about. It is a Bride of Frankenstein costume, right?
It's a Bride of Frankenstein costume. Yeah, there's pictures here on the info dump. So this is the skirt portion, and what I did is I cut it off, and then it won't zip all the way up, but that's okay. I cut a slit into it, and then I decided to paint all the edges like lime green and cut it up and cut holes in it and make it look more distressed, and that was the bottom of the costume. Then for the middle, I usually use one of my just generic black corsets when they fit, which they don't anymore. So I am adjusting this costume to be a 2.0 for Mom's Halloween party this year, because her theme is movie monsters and villains.
Which fits perfectly with Bride of Frankenstein.
Exactly. So I would wear the corset, and then my husband that year was also Mummy. He loves Egyptian stuff and the Mummy movies and mummies. So he was already tearing up a whole bunch of used bed linens and tore me up a bunch of white strips so I could use that for my arm bindings and my corset binding. And then I made myself an entire new top. So I don't like wearing bras with underwire. It hurts. I've actually gotten infections from them before, so I decided to teach myself how to make bullet bras. If you don't know what that is, it's like in the 1960s when they used to have the boobs that look like they poke your eye out. That's a bullet bra.
Yeah, you think the classic Madonna costume.
Yeah, like right there, shaped like a bullet. And so I decided to make one of those as my regular bra, but I also made one for this costume. So it's like a bra top attached to a shirt that has like electricity kind of spinning around it in a bullet bra type setting.
Well, and that must have been quite the learning process just in and of itself, like learning how to make a bra.
It took me an entire month just to make that bra. I could probably do a whole nother thing on that, but I'm going to have to remake it because bras, like everything else on my body, I change shape and I need to make a new one all the time. I also wore that one for 2 years and it's pretty dead. But yeah, I had to make 4 or 5 different muslins for that one, and I'd already made the bra, so I basically just took the bra pattern and just made it in fabric and then stuffed it so that it would be nice and pointy. So it's not all me under there. That's definitely just fake boob. And I took a shirt that I liked that had stripes on it with a knit, which is obviously something that stretches, and I made that my halter top to keep everything up. And then my husband had the sheets, like I said, and I found he didn't need one, so I took one and I made it like an over jacket, kind of like Dr. Scrubs. And then I painted and cut up that too, so that it was like green. I like the idea of the greenish on the Bride of Frankenstein, so it's not just black and white. And I have pictures here of 2 different years where I wore this costume. Once I did it with like a pretty pasty white face, and another time I did it with more stitches. I think I like the more stitches look.
Yeah, I think that looks pretty good.
Yeah.
But we definitely, if we're talking about this costume, we gotta talk about the wig.
The wig is the part that kind of, besides the dress, which I had in my closet forever, the wig kind of inspired this costume, which is funny because I found it at a loony store for $12. So while I was at the loony store, I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good looking wig. Some wigs, like I bought my Elvira one at Superstore, I think, or the Value Village. It's weird sometimes the places you find good wigs. And that one I really liked. And while I was at that loony store, they also had like the little mini LED lights. And so I bought the LED lights to put into the hair. And I used Crin, which is like this horsehair ribbon that you can use for different art projects. People use it for ribbon on things, but you can also include it into like your skirts to make them fluff out. But they're see-through, and this one was colored like silver white, and I used that to make the stripes up the side of the hair, and then I can turn it on. So I've got 2 different battery packs in that hair that I turn on for my LED lights.
So originally it was just a black wig, and then you added
black wig with the white streak, but it didn't have the Crin or the lights in it.
The lights, yeah. Obviously, you definitely wouldn't have the lights.
Yeah, and then there's bangs here too, because initially I kind of wanted to do it pinup style, so I had bangs. But now that I'm gonna like wear my glasses, I'm not gonna do that. I have these really cool glasses that are very elaborate, so I'm not gonna put the bangs on. But you can tell the difference between when I first wore it with the bangs and when I didn't.
Yeah, now that I'm looking at it here.
Yeah. And then, of course, my necklace, which is actually just a normal necklace for me. The one that's full of eyeballs, because I just like eyeballs. And I thought it went really well. And I found this Frankenstein mug I've been using too. I just thought it was great because it was actually a pretty easy costume for me. I mean, I already have stacker boots, the really big, high platform boots. I already have a couple pairs of those, so I wear that. And I throw it on as a Halloween costume if I just need to throw something on and run out the door, basically.
Yeah, considering how much effort you and your husband put into every Halloween costume that you make, this would be one of the ones that requires the least amount of makeup and other additions, right? You're not gluing anything to yourself for this one.
No, they're mostly just pieces to put on, and it's a lot of pieces, so it's freaking hot. I'll wind up sitting outside in Kamloops, and I'll be perfectly fine in October without a jacket. But it's great. I do love it. The only change I'm doing this year, I'm slitting up the skirt more, so I have to kind of alter that a bit more because I want to be able to zip it up all the way properly. And then I'm going to use that stripy corset that I already showed you guys that I had made instead underneath, because this black corset's too small for me. So hopefully it'll work out as long as I wear suspenders. I am learning from last year's Halloween costume. If you have a big skirt, wear fucking suspenders. Otherwise your butt's going to be exposed. And not everybody wants that.
Yeah, you don't want to be pulling up your skirt all
day. Yeah, no. As well, it helps keep the skirt up, so you can just pick the whole skirt up if you have to pee, because taking this kind of stuff off is a bad idea.
I like the stitch pattern as well, because it requires less makeup on your face, and that's one of the things that like I hate about costumes is when I have a mask or too much makeup on my face. It's too distracting for me.
And honestly, I even use like kids' face paint sometimes because it's the best stuff. And it does, because I have super allergies. You don't have to go
super fancy, right?
No, like I have super allergies, so just like you, with sensitive skin. And though I have found that sometimes the black does stain. I did it in like as a scarecrow costume, and my whole chin was black, and then it looked like I had a 5 o'clock shadow for a bit. So be careful with the black.
Yeah, not exactly what you want.
No, but that's okay. Whatever. It's me. I don't care.
You also have to be careful what you wipe it off with.
Not really. I mean, it's literally watercolor. So you could even use a baby wipe.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how we've had multiple times, because my mom's Halloween party, there are a lot of people that come to that party, and she gives out a reward for people with the best costume. And so there have definitely been some times where people put quite a lot of effort into their costume, but then they're completely covered like head to toe in red paint, and they wind up like staining their bathrooms, just taking a bath afterwards.
Yeah, this kind of like hair dye. You're just gonna have to expect it. If you're gonna do it, your bathroom's gonna look like a murder scene. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, well, especially because they all drunk up at our party, and we will go into the bathroom, and there's like red handprints on the walls. Like, where the hell did this come from?
Sometimes it's dad with actual bloody footprints.
Yeah, sometimes,
really.
yeah.
Is that decor, or what did dad do this time? But yeah, I'm enjoying the idea of wearing that for moms this year. Something a little bit easy for me, because I've got one market to go to. And so someone also from my old workplace wants me to teach them sewing. I don't know if I'm really a very good teacher, but I'm willing to give it a try once, right? So
yeah.
Just to say that I did. And some of those Halloween costumes, like as much as mine are pretty elaborate, Dory's the one that always beats me. Almost every time.
Yeah, he's very talented in his costume creation.
He's very, very detail oriented. If he's going to do it, it's going to be, I'm not sure what he's doing this year, but we'll see. He can always revive one of the mummies because he's done several.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd definitely like to get pictures of some of the stuff that you guys have gone in in the past. His Anubis mask, I believe it was, that he showed up with one year that he made entirely on his own. Like, he could fully constructed. It was quite impressive. Everybody was very impressed by that.
Yeah, wire, construction, foam, and then faux fur. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we definitely still have pictures. I don't want to share them all because then if I do, I can't do a podcast about those other costumes.
Yeah.
But I will.
Well, it's also, for that, I would like to get Doran on to talk about it. Because
true.
That's one of his completed projects. I'd love to talk about that.
I will definitely ask him for you at some point.
At some point, yeah.
So, I think that's about it, unless you want to talk about anything else.
Just, I guess, what I've got planned coming up for the week in hobbying. I've got to finish those 2 miniatures. I don't have D&D coming up this Sunday, so I'm not in a big rush to do it, but I do want to continue to expand my arsenal of winter terrain. So I might be making some ice banks, some snow banks, some rocks, like barren rocks. That's kind of what I have in the tank for terrain making. And since it's going to be a while before the next D&D session, I might actually do some work on the website since it's been a while.
I look forward to seeing the snow type stuff because you haven't really done that before.
Not much, no. And the stuff that I have been doing is multi-purpose for either spooky or snow. So the ice drifts that I might potentially make would be more focused on being fully snow. We'll see whether or not I actually get around to doing that.
And I'm going to try and work on probably my Dracula pillow and my mummy pillow and so much more words about categories concerning hobbits for my website. Proud of myself for doing it. This website better be freaking killer by the time I'm done, man. I believe it will.
I'm glad I only have to put in as much effort as I deem worthy towards my website.
What everybody keeps telling me is once it's up, it's easy, because when you add new things, you're only adding the individual new things. It's not like I'm doing all 100 again, so.
Right.
I believe in me.
Yeah, for me, my website, near the front of it is a post that says, this DM has too much time on his hands. And that's the only time when I start working on the website.
Well, you've got it now, so I'm looking forward to seeing some more.
Yeah, I'll probably upload some pictures. I got all those pictures of the Beast Woman army. I'll probably be putting them into a gallery, most likely. And maybe I'll take some pictures of the miniatures I haven't posted yet onto the website, which for me would be silkquest.ca. And the linked up for the stuff that we've been talking about today will be available on where I'm putting all of the link dumps now for Creative Questions, which is soloquest.ca/creative questions, I believe.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it'll definitely be on the YouTube, so you can link it directly,
Mm-hmm.
as well as you guys can keep track of any of the stuff I've been doing on New Nerd Novelties on Facebook or Instagram, as well as TikTok, though I do update Facebook the most.
Yes, and one of the things I think that we are going to be endeavoring to do in the near future is to start uploading this podcast to other places besides YouTube.
Yeah, well, I'm going to put it on my website when it's up, but you can do it on yours as well if you'd like.
Right, yeah, but also where a lot of podcasts are found as well, such as like iTunes and SoundCloud and stuff like that.
That's true. I'll definitely take a look into that. Mm-hmm. So thank you everybody for listening, and I hope you have a great day.
Yes.
This has been Desiree Silver and Liam Hewlett of the brother-sister duo of creative questions.
Well, be here next week.
Have a great time. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.